A man was rescued after he had produced identity documents to prove that he was not a foreigner in South Africa. He was almost killed by a mob who were marching some 2 years ago in an anti-foreign march in Pretoria. This image and the credits are given here, and you can read the story on this Sunday Times of South Africa given here. At the same time, you can see that he's an African, he's black. And then on the other side, the Chinese are given the leeway, the freedom to do whatever they want in South Africa. They even are building police stations. You can read more about the police stations in Zambia, Zambian Observer given here. There is no fear for Chinese, Europeans, Italians who are in South Africa other than the common thieves and burglars. But in terms of mass dislike by the majority of South Africans, it is quite the opposite. Priest Rabbi LM Tumizulu here on Africa, surely not to this level. What is fueling xenophobia in South Africa, or what fuels xenophobia in South Africa? Why are black people considered foreigners when they move into any other country within the continent of Africa, or those from the diaspora who were taken by slavery, and we know for sure that they went into slavery out of Africa? Why do we want passports, visas for them even to visit Africa? Who is to blame for the wars and divisions between diaspora black indigenous people and those from Africa? Even the United Nations produced a report on xenophobic behavior and xenophobic attacks and fears in South Africa. It is quite clear that we have to understand what is xenophobia. From an online dictionary, this word comes from the Greek words xenos, which means strange or foreigner, and phobos, which means a fear. So you got agoraphobia, you got a lot of other phobias. Xenophobia is the irrational fear of foreigners. Who is a foreigner in the case of South Africa? It should be someone who is not black. But it's not like that. South African xenophobic and social behavior in South Africa is actually a fact when we are said that only black people from West Africa, other Southern African countries, from East Africa, and citizens of other black nations are always targeted in xenophobic attacks in South Africa. We have never seen South Africans attacking British citizens, Germans, Russians, Chinese, Indians. No, not at all. It's not that we wish that they should attack other people. No ways. But what we want to emphasize is the reality of what is happening there. That the Chinese are happier and much more cozy in South Africa. Think about this, Mahlabe Zulu. Let's think about this quite serious, because this is a matter of understanding. Otherwise, ignorance becomes satanic, because what we fail to understand is a small piece of history that when we look at it, we must say, oh, we shouldn't think like this as whole of Africa, especially in South Africa, when we attack other brothers and sisters whom we identify as foreigners. How do you call them foreigners when they are from Africa? Who told you that this is South Africa, these borders are South Africa? Who told you that these are countries? Who gave these borders, these straight lines like that? These straight lines like that. Are these natural borders? These are European countries found in Africa. This is a map of modern Africa today. Right? This is the current map that you can go to Zimbabwe, you can go to Malawi, you can go. These are countries, Rwanda, Burundi, small little countries like that. And this is the map of Africa, which was drawn in Europe by Europeans. And these are the countries that I have told you today, that these African countries are European countries. Maybe Ethiopia only. So you see, German East Africa, or you call it Tanzania, only names have been changed. Only names, but the borders are still the same. There is the map. So there is no African country that is fully independent today. If you think I am wrong, give me the proof. Why were boundaries stable even following decolonization? Because this is a policy for policy makers that they were given by the people that gave them so-called independence. So let us not think that we have independence in Africa, because the Berlin Conference is behind the Organization of African Union, or African Union today, and the current countries in Africa are run by the Berlin Conference. That's a fact. That's why you see South Africans thinking that that's their country. That's why one president said, this is my country. That's why they promote nationalism. That's why they fund nationalism and sovereignty so much, to the point that people think that they are of the country they name. In 1963, during the era of independence, the Organization of African Union, or African Unit, agreed to a policy of inviolable borders. Whose borders? Which dictated that colonial era borders were to be upheld, with one caveat: due to the French policy of governing their colonies as large federal territories, several countries were created out of each of France's former colonies. That's what they did. That's the only thing they did, using the old territorial boundaries for the new countries' boundaries. They were Pan-Africanist effort, but they were all thwarted. You can read more from this website here about this. So when Europeans and white Arabs set foot into Africa, including the so-called Middle East, which never existed, which doesn't exist, they found cheap labor, which they enslaved and used force, all resources, diamonds, gold, rubber and ivory, and wild animals, and a very good, lovely continent. European economic history and the whole Earth's history was changed because of Africa. What the Europeans did, they crafted a fiat monetary system in which they print pieces of paper and give Africans, and they exchange that for whatever they want out of the mineral riches of Africa: oil, gold, diamonds, timber, even labor. This is a very crucial thing to understand. And the other thing that we have to understand is that without Africa's labor and minerals, this world will be totally different. And also knowledge, technology, they stole from Africa. That's a fact. So Africa has deteriorated because of these factors. If you go to this Facebook page, you read the following: we bled Africa for 4.5 centuries. We pillaged its resources. Then we said they are good for nothing. In the name of religion, we destroyed their cultures. And then now, when we have to do things more elegantly, we brainwash them with scholarships. Then we state that miserable Africa is not in such a fabulous condition that it doesn't produce elites. After having enriched ourselves at their expense, we lecture them. Ad bata. Jacques Chirac, president of France, interview in Le Monde newspaper. He is telling the truth. And this is a wrong map for Africa, by the way. When we look again at religion, many Africans think that Christianity, the Bible, the Quran, is all fake. Black people drop the religion of Christianity, and then they jump into Islam, thinking that Islam is it. Whether that Islam is calling itself black or anything, it is an enslaving religion. It's not an African native religion. It doesn't matter whether it's championed by black people, whether it has produced great athletes, whether it produces a certain mentality. It is still a colonial, non-African, non-native religion. Islam is in the same class as Christianity. It's not an African religion. It's not a true religion either. It doesn't lead you anywhere. It leads you into slavery and servitude. You can read more from this website. Africa surely not to this level. It is obvious to say that imperialism changed the religious face of Africa. Through imperialism, Christianity was brought to the continent. It completely changed the religious dynamic of the black people. Everything about their way of life, including the most sacred, was removed. Black people, Ubuntu philosophy teaches that hospitality must be guaranteed to the stranger. This was our downfall. Because of this attitude, we tolerated the stranger who eventually colonized and enslaved us. This is what we have to change. We have to stop being docile and stand up for what is the truth. Also, on the other hand, Hebrew Israelites' Hamite doctrinal poison is poisoning a lot of black people, Negroes in America, and native black people of America, they've got a new ideology. They say they're not Africans. There is also a divide and rule operation which they can't see. It is well funded, it is well supported, and it is being pushed seemingly by academic, Bible scholars, religious scholars, Islamic scholars of black African race. And they are smart, these individuals. They play with words. They insist that Africans in and from Africa and our brothers in Americas who were taken during enslavement are not the same people. That's what they are teaching. Look at this. Look at this website. Look at this. That's what they are teaching. They say, they are saying, they quote the Bible and say Israelites, American blacks are descendants of Shem, not Ham. Look at that. Then they say this is a Hamite, right? So they picture them and say, oh, this is Hamite. They go to the compact dictionaries on the van, which we know its history and its definition and who drew it and who wrote it. Then they go to Egypt and pick up a few pictures and they say, they go into prophecies, they teach a lot of stuff, they teach Deuteronomy 28, they teach Leviticus 6, they teach all those prophecies, not knowing that Moses was learned in Egypt and he mastered everything from Egypt. And Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26 is not the original. The originals are the Amana letters, the repetitions of the teachers and the ancient prophets in ancient Egypt, not the Hebrews. That's a fact. I've said a lot there. Wars are fought even amongst Africans, the Tutsis, the Hutus, the Debeles, the Shonas, the Ngulis, many, and the Biafra, and the many confusion because of the Berlin Conference and because of Europeanization of our thinking. What would Africa be today if the Europeans had kept their noses out of it? Probably there would be true unity, because it was based on totems and totemism, which had no borders. Who is to blame for the influx of Africans into South Africa? They are not foreigners. We are going home. It's in our continent. We don't need anybody to tell me that I'm not a South African. Go to hell. Go to hell. Go to Europe and live there. Leave Africa. I don't observe any borders in Africa. I carry a passport because of colonialism. I see these borders and pass through customs because of colonialism. They are manning it for the sake of Europe. Other than that, I wouldn't care less for any border. First, they are not going into a foreign country. Political mental vacuum is what is causing it. Now let's compare the two differences of great thinkers here. This is the former president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe. This is what he says. The white man is not indigenous to Africa. Correct. Now he kills his fact by saying Africa is for Africans. He is copying Gavi. That's how he has killed it. That fact. Zimbabwe is for Zimbabweans. That's the death knell of all his statements, and his behavior demonstrates that obviously he was working for the system. Now listen to Marcus Garvey. He said, Africa for Africans. The Negro peoples of the world should concentrate building up for themselves a great nation in Africa. One country called Africa. The whole earth called Africa. That's a great thinker. I don't care whether he was a Freemason or not, but what he's saying there holds water. But he is signaling to his masters that no, I'm not really saying it. He is dividing the Africans by telling them that Zimbabwe is for Zimbabweans. So South Africans will say South Africa for South Africans. Mozambicans, Mozambique for Mozambique. Who gave you the borders? Who told you that these are your countries? Biafra war, corruption, abuse of power, richest and biggest continent, Africa, poorest and a playing ground even for China. Africa's stupidity in politics surely is not normal. It is based on the big men versus the systematic merit. So we think African leadership is a failure. That's wrong. Poor economic management by African leadership is not a failure, but it is the agenda they are told to run by the Berlin Conference masters. So some leaders like Yoweri Museveni, if you go on this YouTube, they've said that they are not our servants. Whose servant is he? He's telling us that he's a European servant. So Europeans, white Arabs, and soon Chinese imperialism will annihilate Africa if we are not careful. With the idea of nationalism and sovereignty, we have a political system that is already Euro-driven and is upside down. Our continent is divided to suit European political economic agenda, aid to the socialization of tribalism, nepotism and corruption at independence and at every possible level of government to social interactions. The upheaval is so huge and so wide. And Africans, if ever they are existing in 100 years from now, will cry and weep for this. Political and economic turmoil is a well-calculated European tactic to continue to sustain a supply of labor, materials, and other resources to develop countries. What we need to do now in Pronto is we need to do a systems approach like this to formulate think tanks so that these think tanks can join hands and they reverse everything as fast as possible. Join hands with Hamiti Iburu Ethics as we craft a think tank method to rescue our race. Africa, never again should we fall any further, surely not to a lower level than this. Remove ignorance. The whole earth is Africa. To hell with xenophobia, tribalism, nationalism, and anything that divides Africa, whether it's by God, by religion, by Jesus, or by what. To hell with that. Let's unite as black people and work together. This is the richest continent on earth. Subscribe to our channel, Hamiti Iburu Ethics. This is Preacher Rabbi LM Tumizulu. This is our email. Tatenta, thank you, Siabonga. Have a great life in unity.